Hey guys, Civilord here, back again with another Top 13 video, and today I'll be counting down my top 13 favorite action figures of 2022. Spoiler alert, it's none of these! And for those of you who are new to the channel and are wondering, Overlord, why top 13? Because it's my channel, bitch! So before we get into the meat and taters of the top 13 countdown, we do have some honorable mentions to discuss because for one reason or another, they just fell short of the top 13, but deserve to be recognized at any rate. So starting off, we have the King Spider from the McFarlane Toys Spawn Universe line. A really solid addition to the Spawn Universe line, and one that exceeded your boy's expectations, because that's how you get recognized here at Overlord Productions. If you can exceed my relatively reasonable but sometimes high expectations, you will be held in the utmost highest regards here. That said, I have absolutely no idea who this guy is, so I have no attachment to the character. Hence why he's not in the top 13, even though he's a really good figure. Moving on from him, though, we have the Amazing Fantasy 15 60th Anniversary Spider-Man from the Hasbro Marvel Legends line. In my opinion, for a Hasbro-era Marvel Legends collection anyways, I know a lot of people still like the Toy Biz Spider-Man with the articulated fingers and stuff, but in my opinion, this is the best Spider-Man figure we've gotten in the life of the Marvel Legends line, at least under the reign of Hasbro. And that says a lot, because Hasbro's been doing a lot of things that your boy is not a fan of over the past year, but when they do good, they do really good. And this figure is a perfect example of that. He comes with 4 pairs of hands, 2 sets of web wings, which do kind of fall off, but hey, it's the thought that counts. And he does come with a web line. Granted, it's the same crappy web line from 2012, but hey, who's counting? Shy of coming with a Peter Parker head, a loose-fitting mask he could hold in his hand, and maybe a camera, backpack, and a Daily Bugle newspaper rolled up or something. I know that's asking for a lot, but what else could you possibly have with a Spider-Man figure? This is by far the best Spider-Man in Marvel Legends. I don't care. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Do not even try to argue that is the Renew Your Vows Spider-Man because it has toe joints. The anatomy on that thing is hot garbage. This thing is almost perfect. I wish he had a double ball peg in the head, maybe a little bit more range in the torso. And I do wish the butterfly joints were a little bit more effective. But for the most part, at the price point he clocks in at, which is about 25 to 30 bucks, you can't really do much better than that, man. Moving on from him, though, we have Demona from the NECA Toys Disney's Gargoyles Ultimates line. And we all know why she didn't crack the top 13. I mean, do we need to beat around the bush with this? The frickin' wings, dude. Which are still a problem, but they've improved since this release. But the frickin' wings being loose when I got mine is just unacceptable, since they are a major part of the aesthetic when it comes to the gargoyle characters. Especially the gargoyle characters. That is unacceptable in my opinion. 110% unacceptable. But shout out to my good buddy Evil Villain for hooking up a new set of wings for my figure, which are not loose as all get out. Check out the last What's in the Box video I did yesterday for a little bit more on that. Moving on from her, though, absolutely gorgeous figure, by the way, we have the Spirit Iron Knife figure from the Hasbro G.I. Joe Classified Series line, which has been pumping out banger after banger after banger, in my opinion. Arguably one of the best Hasbro lines out there, although some of the more recent releases have had their fair share of issues. Thankfully, Spirit Iron Knife came out long before that. This is an awesome addition to the G.I. Joe Classified Series line and my G.I. Joe team. Even though I am not the biggest G.I. Joe fan in the world, I always had a soft spot for Spirit, because if you guys know me, you guys know I love a really awesome Native American character, which Spirit is. And on top of that, it comes the frickin' Eagle with interchangeable wings. He costs less than most Marvel Legends. I just don't get it. It's the same company, for crying out loud. What the heck? Moving on from him, though, the final honorable mention I would like to point out here is the Deathstroke figure from the McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse line, because not a lot of people are talking about him. I mean, the sculpt on this guy, albeit with those chunky arse elbows, not doing him any favors, is almost 100% flawless. It is so good. He's got really good anatomy. He's got really good range of movement. He's got more range of movement than the standard McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse figure. But the only thing really holding him back for me is the sheer lack of any sort of pouch on his right hip. It just seems unfinished. And yeah, it would have been nice if we got some guns with this guy. I'm not going to complain about the sword again. I already said I don't care for the design of that sword, but if it's supposed to go with him, it's supposed to go with him. If it's from a comic, it's from a comic. There's no sense of complaining about that. That's just stupid in my opinion. If it's based off specific art, it should look like that specific art. Much like that Beast Boy collect-to-build figure everyone's complaining about because it looks like the Hulk or something. That's just stupid. Like, it's supposed to look like that. Get over it. So, with that being said, now that we've discussed all of the honorable mentions shown, it's now time to move right along and kick things off with the number 13 spot. Coming in at the number 13 spot, we have the NECA Toys American Werewolf in London Ultimate Kessler Wolf. Now, don't get it twisted. Well, I do understand that this guy is in the lowest spot on my top 13 list. That's mostly because I'm not 100% sure if he came out in 2021 or 2022, so I don't want him to take away from other figures on my list that did actually come out in 2022. But regardless of when he came out, I couldn't leave him off a list either way, and there was no room to fudge him into the 2021 list, so here we are. And might I add, we don't get a lot of really awesome werewolf figures, at least not for the low price of $35 to $40. I mean, seriously, I've seen people army build this guy and have packs of them attacking their other figures, which is really cool, but I just don't have the finances to do that, at least not at this current time. Maybe someday, because, again, it does look really cool, and just the thought of a bunch of these guys ganging up on you, you're freaking done, man. You are 110% friggin' done. Coming in at the number 12 spot is the only figure on this list that could possibly get me banned from YouTube. We'll see how that goes. But at any rate, we are of course talking about the Executive Replicas / Loose Collector Coffin Comics Legacy Series, Hell Witch. And much like Lady Death before her on my top 13 action figures of the 2021 video, Hell Witch is the only female character on my list for this past year. And that's not such a bad thing, because when Executive Replicas and Loose Collector nail it, they nail it on the back of the head and put all other female figures to absolute and pitiful shame. We're talking sit in the corner and think about your life shame, because for whatever reason, they're able to give us female comic book characters that are actually built like female comic book characters. Who'da thunk it? However, my only major caveat with this particular figure is the price point. I think for the price of $60 to $70, we could be getting a little bit more for our money, or they could maybe lower the price about $5-10. I'd feel a little bit more comfortable if she was somewhere in the ballpark of 50 to 60 tops as opposed to 60 to 70, especially since she is essentially a glorified female Marvel Legends figure. And I mean that in the best way possible, because this is what female Marvel Legends should be, not actually what they are. But I guess if they're going to stick to the price point they're at, I would like a stand, because these high heel, stiletto heel wearing femme fatales are very tricky to stand after a while. I actually had quite a time getting Hell Witch to stand for this video. That, and not for nothing, but she definitely makes up for the major upset that was the Tarna from Heavy Metal figure, which is quite possibly my absolute most disappointing figure of 2022. Coming in at the number 11 spot is the first Hasbro entry on this list, and that is of course going to be none other than the G.I. Joe Classified series, Storm Shadow. Now, while I must admit I am a full-time plebeian dingus when it comes to G.I. Joe, but I always liked Storm Shadow and Snake Eyes. They were arguably my favorites out of the entire series, even though I don't have that much nostalgia for the series outside of, you know, the season of the cartoon that had Slaughter's Marauders in it, or the 80s movie. G.I. Joe's never been one of my big things. Not one of my top loves, as I like to say. But this Storm Shadow, by far, is one of the best sculpts Hasbro has ever done. period. Do not Pesco. Do not collect $200. Do not do jack diddly squat. This guy's sculpt is bordering on flawless, and it is a darn shame because Hasbro just doesn't seem to give a crap anymore. So I am unsure of the future of this line, or if we're going to get any more sculpts like good old Storm Shadow here. The only thing that could have made him better is a few more accessories like his grapple hook, an unmasked head, maybe some fist hands or shuriken holding hands, because he's got some shurikens on his belt there, but none to hold. But let's just say that this guy just barely edged out my boy Spirit Iron Knife based on the tremendous sculpt alone. Coming in at the number 10 spot is the Mattel Masterverse Masters of the Universe New Eternia Beastman, a deluxe release in the Masterverse line released by the fine folks over at Mattel, one that truly feels like a deluxe release for this line, because unlike some of the deluxe figures as of late, which have seemed a bit lacking, for lack of a better term, good old Beastman here is anything but that. Between all the added armor bits and extra pieces to make either the tribal leader look for this character or a tried and true classic version of Beastman, you get a really solid base body underneath, a 100% unique sculpt to this figure, and one I wish we had when the Revelation version of Beastman came out, because that one, in my opinion, while it was a decent figure, it seemed kind of small. This feels like Beastman to me, much like the Too Bad that came out this past year. This guy definitely feels like a deluxe figure. He's big, he's chunky, he's got a lot of parts. Granted, I wish he had a couple extra hands, because we don't have 2 fists or 2 claw hands, but beggars can't be choosers. We do get that awesome spiked club, which weighs a ton, considering how it's made. And then we also get the tried and true classic Beastman weapon of choice, the whip, which I wish we could do something better with. I'm not sure what exactly, maybe a bendy wire. I mean, we do get bendy wire capes from Mattel now and then, but I would like to see them try something different for the Beastman whip. Maybe something made of rubber, because that's how the 2000X one was, but over time I could see that degrading. Granted, my 2000X one hasn't done that. Knock on wood, it stays that way. But in my opinion, this is the epitome of what a good Masterverse release is, and should be. Coming in at the number 9 spot is one behemoth of a figure. Notice a pattern here? Lots of chunky monkeys on my list. But of course we are talking about none other than the McFarlane Toys DC Multiverse Bane Mega Fig. And while this isn't my mind's eye view of this character, I've stated before, both in my review and off it, that I'm not a fan of this harness he's got going on. It reminds me a lot more of KG Beast than Bane. Maybe if they threw some Venom tanks on there, I'd like it a little bit more, but it's just not for me, I guess. On top of that, it does feel a little unfinished, because it seems to me like there should be another Venom tube going from his bicep onto his backpack somewhere. I don't know, almost every single incarnation of Bane have a tube going from the arms into the back, whether it's the back of his head or some kind of backpack. It just feels a little unfinished to me. And on top of all that, we didn't get paint on the back of the hands. That's not so much of a big deal for me personally. The thing that is, though, is the lack of contrast in the mask. Now, I'm not opposed to the mask not being white. I like a lot of Bane designs that do not have the black and white mask with the red eyes like Nightfall, but the contrast is very minuscule on this mask. It just seems to blend in with the black. And while I like the black, I like the red on the eyes, I think the face could have been just a touch brighter. That, and I am visually impaired, so it is a little bit more difficult for me to see such things. So take that into account before you go leaving a stupid comment saying I'm an idiot. That said, though, I wouldn't be opposed to seeing a more tried and true classic version of Bane utilizing this buck. Hopefully it's not a Walmart exclusive like that stupid Nightfall Batman, which I still don't have. But for $40, this is the best Bane action figure on the market. Yeah, it's not the most articulated, but it ain't going to cost you $2 like the DC Classics one either, which is great in its own right, but this one, for someone on a budget, will do just fine, in my opinion. Speaking of one behemoth of a figure, coming in at the number 8 spot is quite possibly the biggest thing to put Hasbro to shame since, well, the last larger character this company made in this line. You have the Diamond Select, Marvel Select, Beta Ray Bill. That's right, good old Norse horse himself makes his way into the number 8 spot on my top 13 action figures list because for the low price of $29.99 plus sales tax, because, well, screw sales tax, you get one heck of a figure that is a sculpt 100% unique to his own with plenty of paint to boot. I mean, seriously, this guy weighs about a pound last I checked, and quite possibly weighs more, has more sculpt work, and more paint than an entire Marvel Legends wave. Let me say that again. This guy has more sculpt, more paint, and quite possibly more weight than an entire Marvel Legends wave, especially ones with mini Build-A-Figures like Cosmo the Space Dog. I mean, seriously? Question mark. That said, this figure isn't perfect. For those of you who remember my review, I had a bit of a snafu with mine, but shout out to Amazon for hooking up a replacement and fixing that issue I previously had. And also a shout out to Mrs. Overlord, aka Mama Overlord, for hooking this figure up, giving him a bit of a sentimental value to me personally. That said though, I would have liked an alternate, more traditional looking head sculpt for Beta Ray Bill here, because while I love the Warhawk, I'm going to twist it. It's a very unique look for the character. It does inhibit the head movement quite a bit. That said, the only other thing I could have asked for maybe is a pair of alternate hands, but hey, you only got 2 arms to work with, right? So, less stuff to put in the bag, I guess. That said, though, this guy is 110% worth the price of admission, right down to the cosmic suspenders. Coming in at the number 7 spot, funny enough, is the Super 7 Thundercats Ultimates Mumm-Ra the Ever-Living. Mostly because this guy evokes one heck of a shelf presence, standing taller than most of the other Thundercats figures in the Super 7 Thundercats Ultimates line. This guy is definitely a sight to behold. Not without his caveats though, because I'm not the biggest fan of how the cape attaches to this guy. I think they could have implemented that a little bit better. I also believe that we could have got a little bit more range of movement out of the head in particular. Even with all the stuff going on, if that was a double ball peg, we maybe could have gotten this guy to look down at the very least. And on top of all that, as I mentioned in my review of this guy, I'm not a fan of the knee swivel. I wish that was down in his ankle guard or shin guard or whatever you want to call that there. That said though, being a huge Rankin Bass fan myself, mostly of the holiday specials, but I like some of the other stuff too, like the Lord of the Rings movies, The Last Unicorn, and some of the other fantasy stuff they've done. While I'm not the biggest Thundercats fan in the world, I've always loved Mumm-Ra. Whether it's the 2000X version or the classic version, he's definitely one of my top favorite supervillains without a shadow of a doubt. Coming in at the number 6 spot is the only figure that managed to make it onto my top 13 list without being in my possession at this current time. Mostly because I haven't got a shipping notice yet. But of course we are talking about none other than the Four Horsemen Studios Mythic Legion's Unknown One, or Unknown One as I like to call him, because that is a hilarious typo on the back of the packaging for those of you who pay attention to that sort of thing. Otherwise known as a Daith, which I neglected to mention in my review of this figure because I was too distracted by how funny Unknown One sounded. Sue me, I'm only as mature as I am. Despite the fact that I do not have this figure in my possession at this current time, Mr. Brian, aka my dad, aka the old man, was nice enough to lend it to me for review, so that is what we are working with. And I apologize in advance for the blurriness of the picture of the Unknown One, or Unknown One as I like to call him here, but we gotta work with what we got, guys. I can only do so much. And I didn't want to leave this guy off the top 13 because he deserves to be here, despite the fact he is 110% recycled parts. What they did with it is absolutely incredible. Designed by Bill Mancuso, the guy who's responsible for all the tech details on the Tremor figure from the old McFarlane Toys Spawn line, this figure just does something for me, and I could totally understand why people would want to double up or even triple or quadruple up on this guy. He has a lot of customizability to him, despite the fact that he is a very unique color. I don't think we've gotten a lot of figures in this color before. Not for nothing though, but I believe this is the first time they painted the eye holes in the helmet sculpt that they included with this guy, which leads me to want to display mine with that over the Legion's Con exclusive skeleton head, which, funny enough, looks like it's crying in a way. Shout out to my buddy Patrick from the Mythic Legions Cabal for the hookup on that, by the way. But yeah, I'm torn. I don't know what head sculpt to use. I only bought one of these during the in-stock sale for this guy. I'm currently still waiting for mine, so chop chop, Four Horsemen. I want my stuff, and I want it now. Coming in at the number 5 spot is a character I've wanted in figure form for quite some time now, and of course, we are talking about the McFarlane Toys Spawn's Universe Haunt. And I'm happy to report that this guy did not disappoint, because when the Todd Father first announced this guy, I was stoked. I was like, finally, we're getting a Haunt figure. When I finally got my hands on him, I was blown away. This is the epitome of what the Spawn Universe line is capable of. This guy comes with 2 pairs of hands, an effect piece, and a super cool, totally throwback to the old McFarlane Toys days, display base. Like, what more could you possibly ask for? Granted, is he perfect? No, I think he could have a little bit more range here and there, but for the price of $24.99 plus sales tax, because screw sales tax, I really love this guy, and I wouldn't want him any other way. Coming in at the number 4 spot is the NECA Toys Disney's Gargoyles Ultimate Hudson. Not only because it's Ed Asner as a freaking gargoyle, for crying out loud, R.I.P. to the man Ed Asner, but this release right here feels like NECA has finally hit their stride with these Gargoyles figures, and as long as you don't screw up the hinges on the wings like your boy did, I'll totally take the fall for that one. That's on me, guys. Although they could use a bit more loosening up, but out of package, you're able to move the hinges okay. It's just me being overly cautious, and in turn, kind of screwed them up a little bit. Again, that's on me. But at the end of the day, NECA seems to be hitting their stride with these Gargoyles figures, and if this is a sign of what's to come, then the future looks quite bright for this line. But not only are we going to put Hudson on this list, but we're going to put his old pal Bronx on this list as well, because for the first time in Overlord Productions history, I have 2 figures sharing a spot, because Hudson and Bronx were good buddies in the show. They were always seen together, the best of pals, and I refuse to split them up here. So, for the first time in Overlord Productions history, on a top whatever video, I've done top 10s, I've done top 13s, I may have even done top 5s before, but for the first time, we are going to have a tie, because this Bronx figure is freaking amazing. The sculpt is absolutely fantastic, and it goes to show what a canine-esque quadruped release is capable of when done right. Cosmo the Space Dog, indeed. Coming in at the number 3 spot, mostly because the Mezco 1/12 collective version of this character did not make it in time to qualify for my top 13 action figures of the year list, we have the Hasbro Marvel Legends Ghost Rider Retro Series, Johnny Blaze. Now, while we have had a couple of Johnny Blaze figures in the life of the Marvel Legends line since Hasbro brought it back in 2012, of the 3 Johnny Blaze figures we have, if you don't include the bike from the Rider Series version, this is by far, without a doubt, the best Johnny Blaze figure we have in the Marvel Legends line at this current time. He comes with the most accessories, again, not including the bike from the Riders version, because he's got 2 pairs of hands, flame effects, the whippy chain, which fades from a clear, translucent orange color to the nice shiny silver, along with the chain that wraps around the torso, and the very first Johnny Blaze head sculpt in Marvel Legends history, if we don't include the melting face head from the Toy Biz days, that is. Very gruesome head sculpt, I might add. This, in my opinion, is the best Ghost Rider Marvel Legends has given us. Granted, I would like something a little bit more, especially since it was his 50th anniversary after all, but unlike Hasbro, I actually really do care about my boy Johnny Blaze here, and figured if Hasbro wasn't going to give him his due, then I would by putting him at the number 3 spot on my list. Coming in at the number 2 spot for the low price of $19.99 plus sales tax, because screw sales tax, we have the McFarlane Toys Mortal Kombat 11 Shadow of Spawn. Not just because it's a really solid figure for the price point, I mean seriously, you are definitely getting what you're paying for here, but in my opinion, this is by far the best 6 to 7 inch scale, fully articulated Spawn action figure on the market today. Hands down, no contest, I don't care. This is the end-all be-all Spawn to me personally. Is it perfect? No. But for the price point, you can't really do much better than this, folks. That, and this figure is a little bit on the sentimental side for me personally, because I got it from good old Aunt Tammy for Christmas this past year. So shout out to her for hooking me up with quite possibly my favorite Spawn figure in my collection at this current time, even rivaling regular of the channel, the infamous McCoy 11 Spawn, the very first McCoy 11 Spawn. And my number 1 favorite action figure, or action figures in this case, of 2022 are going to be none other than the Four Horsemen Studios Figura Obscura Headless Horseman, along with his mighty Black Stallion. Now, something to note about good old Overlord Productions, for those of you guys not in the know, along with the Minotaur from Greek mythology, the Headless Horseman is one of your boys' favorite fictional characters from folklore and old-timey literature. So when the fine folks over at Four Horsemen Studios announced this bombshell of a release, I was extremely ecstatic to get my grubby little mitts on it and check it out to see just how good it really was. And while I am very happy with this release and happy to finally have a proper tried and true 1/6 scale representation of the Headless Horseman in my collection, it's not perfect, because unfortunately nothing in life ever is, because on my particular Headless Horseman figure, the hands, at least for the pumpkin holding hand, are rather loose, and due to the sheer weight of the pumpkin heads, they just droop down, and that is a bit of a bummer. So fingers crossed they get that straightened out for the Retailer Appreciation Wave release of this guy, because while I do love what the Four Horsemen do, you gotta tighten some things up, guys. Things are getting a little bit too loose for my liking, because it's a darn shame when these really awesome looking figures suffer from the simplest of quality control issues that could be easily remedied with a little bit more care. But with that being said, now it is time that we move on and wrap things up with a bit of a final thought. So there you have it, my top 13, technically 15, but who's counting, action figures of 2022. And while I do understand that I'm a bit late to the game on this video, since it is March 1st as the time I am posting this video, I figured better late than never, and I haven't missed a top 10/13 countdown for just across the board over the past couple of years, and I wasn't going to miss it this year either, so you got to respect that, right? And if you guys want me to post this type of content earlier, then subscribe to the channel so I can maybe someday monetize these videos and get a little extra money so I don't have to play catch up in January and February. I'd really appreciate it, and it would help me out a great deal of getting content out earlier for you guys, because that's what it's all about, getting content out there, trying to beat other guys to the punch, you know? But with that being said, one quick thing to note, I am doing away with the Overlord Productions Action Figure Hall of Fame and instead replacing it with Class of playlists for their respected years. So there will of course be a 2022 Class of playlist featuring pretty much all of the figures you saw in this video. You know, everything is subject to change. I didn't pick up everything that came out this past year, but most things that I put on this list, I'm pretty confident in saying that they will remain on this list. But as far as 2021 and 2020 are concerned, I have made some changes, so let me know if you guys want to see a couple of Redux update videos on those lists, because I'm not opposed to doing that, since we are doing away with the monthly channel updates, just because I would rather put my time into other things, since I am into other things other than just action figures. You know, I'm into movies, I'm into TV, I'm into cartoons, comic books, music, you name it. I would like to branch this channel out, since it is called Overlord Productions after all, and not just Overlord Toy Reviews like my old channel. That said though, I hope you guys enjoyed my top 13 favorite action figures of 2022. I put a lot of work and thought into this video, so I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know what your top favorite action figures of 2022 were in the comments below. I'm very curious to see what your guys' top picks are. But as always, if you are so inclined, please feel free to do all the YouTube rigmarole, as well as hit me up over on Instagram at Overlord Productions. If you ever want to talk toys or anything in particular, this is the #1 best way to get a hold of yours truly. But as always, keep comments civil, especially if you disagree with my list, because the world sucks enough as it is, and quite honestly, nobody's got time for that type of BS, dude. Seriously, get out of here with all that negative energy. Only positive energy is allowed here. Unless we're talking smack about Hasbro, then they deserve a little bit of smack talk, because they need to step it up, dude. Seriously. Ghost Rider's 50th anniversary, and almost nothing to show for it. For shame! And until next time, I'll catch you guys later.